Hello, welcome to another episode of the Art of Life podcast. So, today I have a very special guest, Karen. She joins us all the way from Canada. Now, Karen holds a rare university degree in Thanatology and a BA in sociology. So, she is going to talk to us about grief today, about high conflict divorce, and how we can all move on from that. So, welcome, Karen. Glad to have you on the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
How are you today? How's your day been so far? Because it's my morning and it's been your evening.
My evening, we're getting quite cold up in Canada. It's cold now, but yeah, it's been a very busy day. So, how about you?
Very good. I've just started my day and I'm really excited to start this conversation with you. So, the
hmm
first thing when I was looking at this, and I know a little bit of your story, but I don't know a lot, what really caught me was that you've done degree in thanatology. And to be honest, I just had
mm
to go and really Google it and understand what it is. And so it turns out to be like you study the body after someone's passed away. So just curious, what got you into it? Why did you do this? Just walk us through your story.
So, Thanatology is, as you said, is a rare degree. It's a study of bereavement, grief, and loss. I think there's only in North America there may be one or two schools that offer this degree. So I'm assuming worldwide it's not, as you said, it's pretty rare. Why I got into this is, as anyone has their journey, but I lost both my parents within 2 years, and they were quite sudden. And my kids were young, very little, when my mom died, and she died suddenly after my dad died 2 years before. And I was very, very close with her, and I was very, very lost. There wasn't a lot of support systems. I felt really alone and like an orphan. And so that kind of morphed me into trying to figure out how to do this better, how to help people. It took some time though after that to kind of figure out that I was going to do a degree in grief because, as I said, it wasn't very popular. Like I didn't see it in any social media or any advertising. So I started doing volunteer work with bereavement people. And I also did volunteer with end of life care palliative. So I had seen both the people who had been
Spectrums.
dying and then the people that on the other end, the bereavement. And so I kind of fell into the passion of helping bereavement. And so that's what led me to the degree, which gave me, as we can talk about later, meaning and purpose in life after my parents' sudden deaths. So that's how I kind of got into it, except um, as I grew more in my degree, I also had to do some courses on non-death losses. And non-death losses meaning, such as divorce, job loss, moving. I think some stats say there's over 70 types of non-death losses, right? Like you and your best friend don't talk anymore. Like all these
Yeah.
grief that
Yeah.
we feel today, right? A lot of us feel some sort of little grief every day compared to the grief of a loss of a loved one. So that got me into the divorce field because there's a lot of grief that goes unrecognized in divorce. And so between working with grieving like counseling grieving people as well as educating and doing workshops for grieving people, I've been starting for about, I'm in my fourth year with the divorce stuff, and I'm trying to promote that as well around the world to have more acknowledging that there is a component of grief in the divorce world as well. So that sums it up very shortly. And I've gone through a pretty tough divorce.
Yeah, yeah. No, and what you're saying actually resonates so much. I do have questions on this, like how old were you and so on. But just before I get into it and just talking about grief as such for our listeners as well, we tend to think of grief as, if I lost someone, if I lost a relationship or something. But for with my ex, for example, I had a very toxic relationship. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought I'd mentally separated from him very, very long ago because we tried to stay in the same roof. We tried to just work it for the sake of our children. So it was a long, drawn out process for various reasons. And yet, when we really separated, when that decision was made, and I was talking to a counselor on the phone, and he's telling me, well, you're grieving. And I'm like, why am I grieving? Like, how is this grieving? Because I've done the grieving, for 2 years. And he's like, no, you're still grieving you're mourning your dreams that did
Mhm.
not happen. So
Mhm.
I think we underestimate that sometimes the rational part takes over and we actually grieve a lot. And it depends. Some person could just be grieving as like some person, for them it could just be a grief that they moved a city and they left people behind. For others it could be something normal, whereas something else could be very, very big in their life. So how old were you then when you started comprehending, because you mentioned like your children were really little at the time and you'd lost your parents. How old were you? How were you making your sense in all of this?
So I was in my dad, I think I was 34. So my kids were, one was just born, and
Wow.
she was about 10 months old, and the other one was probably 2 going on 3. And then my mom, who they're also divorced, my mom was, so I was about 2 years right after. So that, and those, what you have to appreciate, there was not a lot of support systems in place. My ex had no idea how to support, which caused massive friction. I look back at that more compassionately now, knowing what I know now. But that's how
Yeah.
that was kind of the demise of the marriage, to be honest with you. If I was to pinpoint, I lasted longer uh, for about 8 years after. And then right before we divorced, I started doing my Thanatology degree. But to speak of what you were saying about that counselor was saying is, so in Thanatology world, we call that layers of loss. And so that's only one component, like the future dreams. There's so many other layers that we don't actually really understand with divorce, right? Or even in grief loss, like a loss of a loved one, right? The layers of loss. We call them either layers of loss or secondary losses. So you have the death or the divorce as the main thing. And then underneath it all, there's layers, right? So future dreams, yes. Also your identity. I had a whole list of them, but if you could think of it as intangible, things that you can't see. So the role you had, you were a wife, your identity, who you were, to a tangible, right? Well, most of us have to move houses. Most of us financially is different. So anything tangible, right? Like the things in
Yeah.
your house, you have to split up. So these are things that not a lot of people that are going through a death, a divorce loss understand. A death loss, it's the same. There's all these secondary losses that we have to, and both of them, if you think, for certain types of death, not a natural order of death, which we can talk about, that's like an elderly natural order of death, right? Anything below a certain age is what we call off time. And off time is what you and I would say is loss of future dreams, right? Because that person isn't here, they should be here. And it correlates with divorce, right? Loss of future dreams, because in divorce, no one ever expects to get, like in marriage, like divorcing, no one, and when you get married, sorry, no one expects to get divorced, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Totally. And we are unprepared.
Mhm.
We're unprepared. So we are coping up with it. And I think the important point that we haven't talked about so far is just that there's an expectation, like you were a mother at that time as well. That must have been really hard because you have very, very little children who cannot even understand what's going on, and yet they have their day-to-day needs and they want you to play with them and they want you to laugh with them. Like you have a newborn, you have a little 2 3 year old child,
Mhm.
so it's very different. Their expectations when you drop them at daycare or when you go to school, it's a different role that you sort of get into. So
Mhm.
often there's the trapped emotion because you just cannot have a space where you can just let go and
Mhm.
grieve how you would
Mhm.
like to grieve, because life has an automatic pilot and you've just got to keep on the treadmill and just keep going with it.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think I was in such shock with my mother's death. I think for the first 6 7 months I just functioned, but I wasn't really at all absorbing, right? I wasn't really, I
You
remember
were
I have story to say that so she died January, and one of my neighbors, I went for a walk, and she's like, they knew my mother, and they said, well, we haven't seen her in a while, and I said, oh, she's fine, because I had not even, yes, and this happens with grievers, I could not accept the reality of the loss. I was still doing a lot of processing. Yeah, so I tell that story quite often, and people are like you, they're shocked, but this is what happens to some people. I just was not able to process this. It took me quite a long time.
Because we have to find comfort somewhere. And how I look at myself whenever I've had like a shocking thing is the day to
Mhm.
day things, it's the day to day routines. Like you've got to have something working,
Mhm.
some routine, because everything else in your world's shaken up. So, like, okay, what is a little bit of routine that I can get? And often, if I look back at my times, I look at the times, okay, what's maybe the next meal, or sometimes even looking after my son that time, as taxing as it feels, it also gives that handrail, so to speak, to just walk on in life,
Mhm.
because there are groceries to be done or there's a meal to be provided, and you sort of do the day that way instead of absorbing or being in the present, because it's just so hard. In
Yeah,
terms of accepting, it's hard.
yeah, and the thing is though is that's why I work with people to try to encourage moments when they come up, and if it's safe to do so, however they release is to release, right? So another thing with grief, it can be, in my world, right, it's, we call them intuitive or instrumental grieving. So intuitive is obviously it's emotional, we express our emotions. And then instrumental, right, is when we do things. So in the gender world, we tend to see men do more instrumental, right? They kind of
Mhm.
think their way through more, and women are more intuitive. However, I've seen it many times, they sway, right? I've seen men break down. I've seen women I've seen women that tell me I'm going gardening today. That's what, so they're doing things, right? So it doesn't, we're not stereotyping to say one does one. It's just in general, everyone sways. I know for myself, with both the divorce and the death losses I've experienced, I've had to do a lot of walking and a lot of forest bathing and a lot of grieving on my own, emoting. So I'm definitely a pendulum person, right? I need to move my body, and I also need to express and have support. So
For our listeners who are listening to this and either loss that they're having, whether they're going through a divorce or whether there's something else that is really significant in their life and causing them griefs, what are some of the immediate things that they can do that you would advise for them?
there's two things we look for. And I wanted to tell everybody that grief is so unique for everybody.
Mhm.
So for you, how you grieve is going to be different than how I grieve. So don't compare yourself with anybody. If you're in a family situation and your parent dies or something, and you notice your brother's not grieving the same way you are, accept that. Everybody grieves so differently, and it causes a lot of friction with family systems when one isn't grieving. Like if I'm emoting and I'm expressing, why aren't you, you're going to look around going, well, why aren't you crying? Right? Well, to understand that so that's one thing I want to say. We're all very, very unique. As I said to you before, we need to lean in. A lot of times the support systems are not as good as we want, and that can be very lacking, right? And I do exercise in both divorce and in the grief world where they fill out a form to figure out their right support systems, because um, I'll mention the divorce one because it's on my head, but it's called the Wild UN exercise. And so you write down a list of all the people in your sphere, right? So even neighbors that you're good for, like decent neighbors, right? Or faith people or whoever, name them all, and then put them in the categories like, so listeners, right? Who are your listeners? And a lot of us don't have that many because there are not really strong listeners, right? Like, but who's that best friend or who's that good family member that you can call up and they will listen. Okay.
And they won't
Because you
judge
need,
you, and they're not going to advise you. They will just be there. Like they
yeah,
will just be a vessel for whatever you want to say
yeah.
without projecting their thoughts. Yeah.
And who's the worker? So the worker we use in divorce, or the doer. So who's the one that's going to bring you the pizza, bring the lasagna over, or if you're divorcing, who's going to help cut the lawn or cook? You know what I mean? So we have the doers type of people, or workers. So, and then the other one is the respite. So who's the one that's going to say, "Hey, let's go. I'm going to take you to the movie. You need to get out of the house, or I'm going to come over and we're going to have watch TV and watch a movie." So those are really important, that people kind of figure out who the right support systems are. So support for me is a really important thing when you're going through either of these losses. Both with death loss, we have a bit of support for a while, and then, as you know, probably it tails off. And a lot of times I see clients where they're still grieving heavy, but they don't have that support system anymore. So another thing is I use is the 4 pillar support, and so I make sure they have, how's the peer support? Do you have good peer support? That's the support groups, or such things that you do, like healing centers, right? Things that they can go to and they feel like a community and they feel supported. And then it's friends and family, right? And then there's yourself, because whether you're going through divorce or any type of non-death loss or death loss, you still have to do the work, right? It's you, and it's hard work. Grief is a big frustration. It's probably the most hardest thing you'll ever get through in life. And so realizing that, I work with mothers that have lost daughters through drug overdose, and the work that these ladies do, it's I'm so proud of them, but it's so hard. But they've done the work, right? And so
And
they
they
still
can't.
need support. Pardon me?
Yeah. I want to also tell people that on the other side, it's a lot brighter. That yes, it feels very, very
Mhm.
hard today. Like just yesterday, I had a client, not as bad as this, but she just had a job loss. She was fired, and she wasn't
Mhm.
fired in a nice way. She was just fired in a really brutal manner. But often, what that can do is it just takes away your sense of identity and so on. So she's going to like really look at herself and really look at all the pieces of her, and all losses, they'll be different and similar in
Mhm.
in fashions. But I want to remind all the listeners that at the end, that there's a before, there's an after picture. Just
Mhm.
like a house can have the before and after picture, and the after, you don't just really realize how the house is looking and how that
Mhm.
was the same house was in shambles before. The redecoration that happens afterwards, that can be really, really glorious. So think of it this way, that if you're doing so much of shift, and if you're really digging out all the dirt and you're like, oh my god, I can't handle this, you got it still because somewhere you know
Mhm.
you wanted it as part of a soul evolution. And I'm not saying it
Mhm.
was a conscious decision, I'm not saying that it's to blame anyone, but this was written for you. You were meant for this significant change, and by significant change I also mean significant evolution.
Mm.
Talk to us a little bit about the after that you see with your clients once they've walked through and they've done the hard work. Just to give our listeners a picture, give them a little bit of hope and strength and inspire them to go through the tough times.
There is a lot of hope. I've worked with all different types of losses, and it's baby steps, it's very gentle baby steps. There's not a huge big transitions within weeks, right? It's very, very gentle baby steps. But what you were saying about your house, right? So another thing is I said to you before, making meaning. So it's building your foundation again. And it may not look like the same house, but it
Mhm.
can still look like a lovely house, just different, right? So it's rebuilding your life however you're going to vision it, like they work with you to help that part of it, right? And they may work with me to help understand what grief is and help them through that. But rebuilding, and we call it making meaning, is really one of the most important things. And it's so different for everybody, and I can only suggest things, right, on how they do that, right? Like if I think of my story, 8 9 years ago, I was so unconfident that I didn't even think I could go work at the variety store.
Yeah. Yep.
That's how that's how
Yep.
low I was, right?
No, for me, going to the shops and simply shopping without crying, without being a mess, like someone looking me in the eye, I was just so bad, I would feel like I would just be a bag of tears. So for me,
Mhm.
just making a shop trip, like really quick, not looking anyone in the eye and just getting my milk bottle or whatever
Mhm.
and coming back, that was a really big step in the beginning. So I
Yeah,
hear you. Yes.
yeah. So there's a lot of I did a lot and I work with a lot of people and it's just very gentle baby steps, right? And yeah, and I look back at where I was or look back where you were and the growth, right? It's been a lot of growth. And there's been a lot of in growth there's a lot of, you know, it's uncomfortable. Divorce is uncomfortable, right? If you think about divorce ways, it's like it's uncomfortable, but as you said, it was meant to be, right? It's kind of what the journey was, right? And accepting that is a huge component, uh, and processing that too. So,
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned about support system. Now,
mhm,
oftentimes, what I also find is, let's say in the office or someone who sort of knows the situation but doesn't know you too well, or sometimes even when people really know you, they want to help you. It's hard to know what to say and what to ask them. Like, it's like usually it sort of becomes like a little big elephant in the room, you know it,
mhm.
but then you just talk about coffee or food or the weather. And even if you want to really sincerely support the person, you just don't know how to approach it. So, how can supporters around them and people who are just in their office and so on, how can they really help them?
So it can be tricky, right? I will say to say nothing is wrong, right? And to be mindful what you say. In when I was doing my degree, we had a talk one day, and we were talking about all the stupid things people say, and the list is long. I mean, if you want examples, I give you examples. But saying something meaningful, they may say, "I don't want to talk about it," because I teach my clients grief boundaries. Right? If they're not ready yet, I want them to say, "I can't do that right now." But that doesn't mean if you're a decent friend to this person or you care about this person, that maybe in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks you kind of approach and say, would you like to go for a cup of tea or how's it going? Is because a lot of time in the grievers, whether divorce or whatever, they isolate, right? And that's okay because they're in so much pain. Like the example of you going out for milk, right? You isolate. So not saying anything at all, but trying to be mindful and kind of having to read the room because um, it's not easy. I'm going to say I've been doing this quite a long time, and even I have to kind of read it out before I even go up and just approach them. Just be mindful. Don't say things like they're at peace or they're in a better place, and do not compare your loss to theirs, right? Like a lot of people go, oh, well, I lost my parents too, and this has nothing to do with you. This is putting yourself in their shoes and their pain and just being there. Like, don't harp on them all the time, but staying consistent, maybe checking in. And they may not answer your phone or the text, but they may see it, right? And so that they know that they'll matter. So I'm also so just keep trying. If you know, and for the people that are in the grieving side, either divorce or death, I teach it a lot. I do this with divorcees as well. Practice what you're going to say to somebody. So if you're going through a tough divorce or you've had a tough a loss, write a script out. Like write it out and practice out. And so when someone comes up to you and you don't want to talk about it, you've kind of already practiced what you're going to say. Like, I don't want to talk about this with you. Thank you for asking. Or this is what happened. I don't want to, So write a script and practice it with somebody else or just with yourself. So at least you have it in your head that if someone comes up to you and says, because not a lot of people are going to, there are going to be people that aren't going to be as aware or as appropriate. So you can have that little practice. That I have to tell you, I use that a lot,
Mhm,
actually.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But then there are people who really matter. or
Mhm.
matter significantly. Like that could be your parents, or that could be someone
Mhm.
in your family. Children, we'll talk about a little bit later because that's a different hat that you've got to put on. But how do you do it? What do you say to your family? What do you say to maybe your mother who's just calling you again and again, and or just wanting to know how you are and so on? How do you
Is this
deal
a
with
death loss or like or both?
maybe, yeah, maybe just talk to whatever you've seen recently. Yeah.
So we talked about before, I talked about grief boundaries, right? I said,
Mm.
depending what type of mother she is, right? If she is helping you,
Yeah, then you can
you
be
know,
more honest.
then you can be more honest, right? And if she's, depending on the parent and child relationship, even adult children, I mean, it depends what type of parent you are. To me, you're allowed boundaries, period, right? And so it depends who they are, right?
Yeah.
Because my mother was very warm, so I would have probably let her in, right? Or, but again, it's not easy for the parent either, even if they're very supportive, because emotions for grief, and I have it in the book, it goes all gamut, right? You can be very angry. Some aren't angry at all. You can be very irritable. Like it shows up in different ways. So I think family members that are supporting ones that are grieving, if they understood that, like the grieving styles, but also the symptoms of grief, right? Like a mother's good intention is like, eat, you need to eat, you need to eat. Well, every time this person's eating, they're getting stomach aches and nauseated because their nervous system, their cortisol levels are all through the roof because of all the uncertainty and or grief or pain they're in, right? So if they understood going, I think my child is is really the energy is all upset and everything, and so they would kind of be more understanding instead of.
Hmm.
But a lot of people don't know, right? Like they don't, and we also have to remember what is the intention of these people? Are they just trying, right? It's just that grievers are, you know, they're in pain.
They're grieving, they're going through their process, and someone who's supporting them. Some often the supporters come from what they know, and what they know is their truth.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
like you gave a very good example. So, when the mom says, "Hey, you've got to eat," because generally, yes, eating is good for you,
Hmm.
um, but you've just got to see what's really happening. So sometimes, as a supporter, just be prepared to see what's really happening and try and be
Hmm.
present in that moment. And rather than going like maybe what the books told you or what your conditioning has been, just try and see how it's really working out. And
Hmm.
sometimes you might just need to be present, and that might mean taking a little bit of a back step on certain things, and that's okay.
And
Yeah.
that's fine, right?
Yeah. So talk to
It's
us
not an
about.
easy thing.
No, yeah, totally. So talk to us about your book. How do you come to writing it, and what's your main message for everyone?
So, Divorce Workshop's been in since 2021, and we had decided about a year in to do a workbook. So it's a very simple workbook, but it's kind of a resource book for those going through or exploring divorce or just breakup. Like it doesn't have to be divorce, it's just, cohabitating couples or whatever. We've we wrote it, it's been about 2 years, and it's graphically pleasing. Like it's so there's about 55 little workouts from who you are divorcing, separating. So you kind of have to figure out, because a lot of us, especially in divorce, especially ones that have more of a toxic type of ex, don't really understand who they're divorcing.
Hmm.
And for myself, I thought, well, of course it's going to be just a normal, practical, simple divorce. Well, it has not been, right? Because I was a little bit naive to think if he didn't behave very well in the marriage, for some reason I thought he was going to behave well in a divorce. That doesn't really change too much, right? So actually, I tell you a little story. I went and got some Reiki. Do you guys have Reiki in Australia?
Hmm. Yes.
And she did treatment on me, and she said, I don't know, you're going to understand this better than me, but she's like, he's stuck in mud, and you cannot teach him anymore. So energetically wise, you have to go. And I tell you, I cried and cried and cried and cried. I released. It was like, but that's the point of that story is that's that character personality is still stuck in mud, and I've been growing and he's still stuck in mud. So the book comes from a real passion because just like that, I was naive. I felt like, I say this all the time, a fish out of water. I didn't know, and I came from a divorced family. So the book helps with insights in divorce, like really in the practical sense, not energetic, practical sense. Divorce is a business. It's a contract that's broken up, right? And then it's legal information. So do you go to a lawyer? Do you mediate? Do you know what's in a separation agreement? And then there's emotions, right? Because emotions are, some people say it's 95% of the divorce, and that's where probably like people come to see you, right? Because it's like as soon as we handle those a little bit better, or understand or aware or cope, we can start letting go, and then the anger starts going. So, and then there's the financial, which is just the financial information, because a lot of people are uncertain about finances in divorce. And then there's co-parenting, because that's also a big skill that not many people know how to do. It's a big adjustment for some, most
Big
actually. And then
change. A
recovery. It's a
child, your
big
children,
change.
everything changes, right? Your home
Mhm,
changes, your identity, everything is changing. So, yes, you're going to adapt, but it's going to be a completely new system. It's going to be a
mhm,
completely new lifestyle as well, depending on the finances you have. And your kids need
mhm,
to have different houses. How are they going to be with the other parent and so on? So, yeah,
mhm.
but glad you're covering all of that.
Yeah, and then recovery, which is, it was the easiest and the nicest one to write, because it's the hope page, right? It's like we've got, I think, 40 pages of recovery. I did want to mention just before that, to remind people that are going through a divorce, that we talk a lot about ourselves that grieve the divorce for different reasons why, right? We talked about at the beginning, but I also want to mention that remember that your kids are grieving. They're grieving the loss of their family foundation, right? And that
Yeah.
when you're with them, you're not grieving because they're with you, but they may be grieving that they're not with their other parent. And
Oh,
then when
yeah.
they're with the other parent, they could be going, I really miss my mom,
Yeah.
right? So I just want to put that in perspective, because it's a lot of like, you're in pain, especially with the holidays coming up, right? And we having to transition a lot of kids, just remember that, yes, you're grieving because you only get them half of the holidays, but they're grieving full time, right? And a lot of times developmentally, they don't know how to handle that. So sometimes with the young ones, they can regress or they can get angry. And yeah, we have that stuff in the book as well. But it's just, I just wanted to mention that, because I, as a child of divorce, that also, no one acknowledged it, right? That I was crying in my room at night, wishing I was with my mom, right? So just be mindful of that for the coming up holidays.
Hmm. No, and that's a very good pointer. And it's one of those things that doesn't stop, in the sense that when the children are growing up, it is a forever thing. And often people think, oh, divorce happened in the past, like your parents separated in the past, and then things mattered. But no, every 14th birthday, every little milestone, when you got a trophy, when things did not work out, right? You have one parent to support. And you would ideally want, like, who doesn't want as a child to have more loving parents? That could also be for
Mm-hmm.
grandparents and so on.
Mm-hmm.
As a child, you want people to just care for you and have that we all want that. Even as we grow up, we
Mm-hmm.
want to have more support around us and people who understand us and care for us. So yes, that's a really big thing to keep in mind. And I think also for parents to understand that it's not around feeling jealous or feeling less than the other parent.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're, like, I know from my relationship, yes, my relationship with my ex was toxic, and I hope it is for a lot of parents. They can say that. But when I would look at that, I would see that, oh, my ex, but he's still a wonderful dad.
Mm-hmm.
May
Good
or
point.
may not agree with it 100%, like, yes, I do this part better and I do something
Mm-hmm.
else better. He doesn't get this or she doesn't get it. That is okay. But they're the only other parent. And if they are good, try and focus on what is that good and just bring that out more and more and more, because it's
Mm-hmm.
good for the child to have that. Biologically, if, let's say, one person was able to raise a child, I always say this, like, we wouldn't need another partner to raise a child. If we need another
Mm-hmm.
partner, there is a need, there is an inherent need to have another parent. And if that is possible, even if it's a very high conflict divorce. It's very good to have that, make space for that, like while you're going for the divorce, but just have that energetic space for it,
Hmm.
like to allow that parent. Do you have tips for parents there?
I have a just something. It just came up. We have it in the book too. The workbook is you have to do an exercise where you have to think. And it's funny because if it's high conflict, or even a lot of divorces are moderate conflict, right? There may not be high, but there's a lot of moderate conflict because you are getting a divorce, right? It's not that easy. Is try to think of something your ex does well, right? Because we're going to think, okay, they don't do this well, they don't do this well, they don't. But try to just you know sit there and go, okay, so maybe they're really into science, right? And you're not very good at science, but your kid is really loves science. Well, then that when they're over at their dad's or mom's, that that is going to be really helpful. That they're going to have these great discussions about science, right? So you understand the exercise, right? So it's just like you're saying, like even though you may not, you and your ex maybe have been really high conflict, but you're good now. At the beginning, you're like, well, he still is the father and he still does some things good, right? So it just puts you in the mindset, right? Like, maybe they do this good and maybe I'm not very creative, but they are. You know what I mean? So you fell in love with them for one reason or another. They have to have something. It can be, you know, it doesn't have to be lots of things, but they have to be something that you can look at and say, yeah, okay, they're pretty good at this.
Yes, yes, and focus on that a lot more, especially the early days when you're separating with your child, to let them feel that. The other thing, tell us about actually how you've seen parents raise their kids better in all these high divorce cases. What can parents do to help their children cope with the grief that the kids are going through all the time?
Well, one thing is awareness that they're actually grieving, right? And giving them space. The thing about children is it's all about, as you've already said, developmentally, right? Like if they're 4, they're going to react differently than you are when you're 10 or 12 or 14. When they're teenagers, they're already trying to pull away from you already, and they may continue to do that, right? And do their sport teams or their clubs. They can show up in grades that are, maybe, watch out for grades. A lot of times I think the tweens are the hardest, right? They're in that kind of really
Hmm.
tough age. So just keep an eye. And I would also say that, especially with those tweens and teenagers, is don't obsess over the divorce to them. One of the biggest mistakes I made is I kept on harping, "Are you guys okay? Are you guys okay?" And they were tweens and they were like, "Enough, we're fine. Like, don't want to talk about it every day with you, mom." I said, "Oh, okay." Right. So just making sure, watch for younger ones, watch behaviors, watch regression. I also want to mention if you're having a moderate or higher conflict, you have to keep the conflict out. You cannot argue. I mean, that it's so well researched. No arguing in front of your children. There's another exercise I have. It's called the front door, back door. The front stage is where you win the Oscar, or the over here we have the cheesy People's Choice Award, which is, I don't care what award, but you're doing holiday concerts right now or whatever's coming up. You do that, the front door, front stage, where you're like, hello, right? The backstage is where you talk to me, to your friends, your family, where you can get out everything and all the frustrations, not in front of your children,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's really, that's one of the big things is kids are already going through enough. It's a big transition. It's a lot of grief, and you need to be, and it's not easy to do. None of this is easy to do.
Yeah, yeah. I think what I always try and remember is that adults are separating. So we separate.
Mhm,
Kids still have that family. So when they
mhm,
draw their family tree, whether at school or with anyone, mom, dad might be in a different house and grandparents might be in different houses.
mhm,
But for them, that's their family tree. That's how they connect the lines. So when we talk to them about the other parent, we talk to them about those conflicts and so on. For them,
mhm,
we're shattering their world.
mhm.
And
That's
so,
right.
really, I love your analogy around front door and back door. Like, keep their front door, which is inviting. They want to grow up in a nice, safe place. Be the parent that you would want to be the parent that you would like
Mhm.
to have. Be that. Even if you feel like, hey, I can't muster the strength and so on, it's okay to say, like I've told my son, and probably you have strategies for that as well. But I've told my son, hey, I'm just overwhelmed right now. Mommy needs a minute or mommy needs five
Mhm.
minutes. And I need that time and I'll separate myself and go into a room. My thing is I meditate and come back. And then
Mhm.
I'm often better. But he's grown up to understand that when mom does that, it's okay. Like she comes out a better person for him.
Mhm. 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 Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So to help parents with that front door, back door, and to deal with them so that they can be better parents for their children and they can give them better things,
Mhm.
they can
Mhm.
bring them up better. What are maybe some of your strategies or perhaps some things that you've outlined in your book?
For the co-parenting,
Yeah.
as
When you are feeling really off, when something's really triggering you, but you want to separate from your child, but your child's right there in that moment with you.
Mhm. That happened often. It happened often. So it was a practice. Like as I said, I'm also, you know, it's a very it's a slow progression, right? And one of the things I also want to mention is if you do come out, like say you get a nasty letter or a text that they're just and you go, oh, and you swear, you say darn it or whatever, and they can tell by your behavior that, the energy is you're
Different.
to repair. You need to repair. I have made mistakes as a co-parent. I rolled my eyes at a couple of Christmas gifts he gave them, right? I didn't say anything, but you know as well as I do that this is not good, right?
Mhm.
It's not good. It's not good for them. And I
Them,
did
it's
it.
their other parent. For them, it's where
Mhm.
they've come from. For them, it's at least 50% of how, and especially if it's your same sex parent or it is someone you love and admire. And it's really
Mhm.
forms intrinsically a part of your world. So, what you're
Yes.
really saying then no to is you're saying that no to that other half of your child.
Mhm. Yes, we have to
So,
remember that. Mhm. Yeah.
yeah,
So my point of this is for people to remember you need to repair because we're human and we're flawed, right? And so we do make mistakes. We all do. That's a self compassion. That's in recovery. I have that. Practice self compassion, but also repair and just say gently, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to react that way. I'm sorry. As you said, I'm overwhelmed. There's just a lot going on right now, right? Because if you're going to keep beat yourself up all the time, that gets really destructive on you too. So just realize that repairing with your children when something happens that you slipped out or you're not doing intentionally, just go and repair.
yeah, yeah, that's a solid advice. I think awesome. I think you and I could just talk for hours. We would still not be
Yes.
done. But it's amazing. I think the workbook, the book that you've got, that's an amazing resource for all the parents, whether I think even just for loss as well, but especially for divorces when they're going
Mhm.
through a conflict, just to be able to process the information. So, how can they access the book and who can you help? Can they reach out to you directly?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. It's called Just Separated. I have a look here. It's like this with the car, which
Yeah.
is a broken up car. So it's on Amazon, and I'm two emails. I'm at grief and loss counselor with one L at gmail.com, and that's my grief, the death loss. And then I'm at Karen at divorceworkshop.ca. That's my email, or divorceworkshop.ca. There's some free tips and some blogs there, and of course our books. And we do offer free consultation. So
Yeah, and I'll
yeah.
put all those links in the show notes as well. So the readers will have access or the listeners will have access to that. Now, the book itself, is that just for parents in America or Canada, or is the legal advice in there going to be valid for people across the world?
It's just legal information. So it's like who how do you interview a lawyer? Can you mediate? It's very just information. It's like keeping your legal bills down. Each jurisdiction is different. Australia is going to be different than UK, but it's just general, like what is in a general separation agreement? I had no idea. This is kind of what's in it. So it's just very, it just is a little bit, it's an educational thing, right? It's not what your child support chart in Australia. It's nothing like that, or UK. It's just a very same with finances, right? Just your budget. One of the workouts in financial is, are you anxious about money, and how maybe you should have to, like, some tools on how to not be so anxious. And so, yeah, like I always say to other divorce professionals, it doesn't take any of your jobs away, but it does really educate the people. And it's like a resource. So the thing I love about this is, say you're having a co-parenting issue and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, because the pages are all individual. It's not like a reading book. You can go into you can go into co-parenting and just look, okay, oh, here's the tip. Like, you don't have to find, it's like it's really, really simple. I almost call it like an encyclopedia for like a divorce. Like, it's just a great resource that you put on your bookshelf and just say, okay, this is bothering me, how do I do this? Put it away. A couple days later, something else comes up, right? So that's kind of way I think anybody who's exploring or going through either divorce or separation, I wish I'd had it, because there's nothing really anything out there like this. And I have a passion to help people, and I wanted to make this book able for more people, right? Because coaching, not everybody can afford, right? But at least the book is more reachable to more people. So,
It does sound like a really, really good book. Because, like you said, you just pick it up, flip a page, and see what suits you. You do it per the day. And it is, from my own experience as well, there is nothing like that in the market. You go out and you think of a lot. And the thing also to take away, especially during a high conflict situation like this, you're not really always able to think straight.
mhm,
And usually a lot of the people who are coming to you, they might be coming with, the right intentions, but they'll be colored with whatever's happened with them. So, like, I remember, for example, when I was going through my process, I just had people who were telling me, no, you know what, you should just get a divorce. Or it was very much around child custody. It was very much being dictated, like how I should have more, or
mhm,
and
mhm.
so on. Like, the people come up with their things. And luckily, I had my own energetic tools to be able to understand and clear up and go, okay, no, I have to think in terms of my child and what's best for my child and not be swayed by that. Because that time your head might not be as clear. So it's very
Mhm.
good to do these exercises during that time, because your exercises, they help you like think a lot more rationally than someone who's coming from a place where it's more emotional and it's more.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right on, all right? You're so overwhelmed. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. And that's why we hope it helps many people, right? Because I don't want people to go through what I did, you know?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And I think it will be such a better place as well, because divorce is a very taxing, emotionally taxing experience for all of us, for us as adults, for all our children as well. And there is a huge increase in divorce rates across the world, anywhere. So
Mhm.
it's just good that we all have a better framework for just working through this process and making it as easy for us and for our children.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think it helps generations after as well, because divorce has such a lasting impact.
Yeah, it does. And I'm so glad there's people like you out there as well that are helping support too, right? The more support we have, I'm just so big on it, the better we get through
Yeah.
divorce or death loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Karen. Thanks for just coming here and just sharing your tips and insights with us. I think the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing. I will be
Thank
putting a
you.
link for the podcast for the book in the podcast show notes so that our listeners can access that. I think it's going to be handy across all over the world. So, any last tips or anything that you want to share? Otherwise, just really, it's been such a pleasure having you. There has been a lot of nuggets that you've shared in this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you and I could have talked for another hour because it just was, there's so much information between us. So, no, it was lovely for me to come on. Thank you for having me, and I love what you do as well.
Thank you for tuning in to the Art of Life podcast. It is definitely your love that keeps me going. wanting to publish even more episodes. So if you feel called, please do leave me a review. I would love to hear what you thought about the episode. If you wanted to connect with me, you can also reach out to me at artoflifecenter.com/hello, because I would love to hear from you. All right, till next time. Bye-bye.